6-4 Rhombi, rectangles, and squares. What is a rhombus? A parallelogram with 4 congruent sides. Using properties of a rhombus. In the diagram, PQRS is a rhombus. What is the value of y? So, because they're all congruent sides, this side is congruent to this one. So you can put 2y plus 3 equals 5y minus 6. Put the equal sign. And then you're going to subtract 3y, and then subtract negative 3, and divide, and y equals 3. So the answer is 3 for that. Special characteristics of a rhombus. Diagonals are perpendicular. So when you draw a diagonal line from one point to the next, draw another one, they are 90 degrees perpendicular inside here. Diagonals bisect pairs of opposite angles. So this diagonal line bisects these two angles. So each one is equal. These two, also these two, these two. So bisecting means cut it in half, exactly half. So each angle here and here, they are congruent. So please draw this line on your paper. Do the 90-degree mark. Draw these marks. And then do the arc with the angles. So they are equal to this equal to this equal to this. These two are equal to each other, these two. Please draw these on your paper. I'll be checking your notes. What is a rectangle? A parallelogram with 4 right angles. Special characteristics of a rectangle. Diagonals are congruent. So here, this diagonal, they are congruent. What is a square? A parallelogram with 4 congruent sides and 4 right angles. Has all of the properties of a rectangle and a rhombus. So diagonals make perpendicular lines. It bisects each angle. So this is 45 and 45, 45, 45, 45, 45, 45, 45, because each angle is 90. And then there also diagonals are congruent. So it has both characteristics of properties of rectangle and rhombus. So quadrilateral, 4 sides, angles add to 360. You can see this Venn diagram. Parallelogram, opposite sides are parallel, opposite sides are congruent, opposite angles are congruent, consecutive angles add to be 180, diagonals bisect. That is the characteristics, 5 things that we actually talked about last class about parallelograms. Has 5 characteristic properties. And here you have, this is everything is a parallelogram family. Inside parallelogram family, you have a rectangle, which is 4 right angles, diagonals are congruent. You have a rhombus, all sides are congruent, diagonals are perpendicular, opposite angles are bisected by diagonals. And then in the middle, you have a square. So this is what they have in common. It has every properties, and it's a regular quadrilateral. Regular means all sides equal, all angles equal. So all congruent, all equal sides. That's called regular polygon. So square is a regular quadrilateral. So please remember this Venn diagram. Everything is inside a parallelogram family. You have rectangle, rhombus, and in the middle, you have square. Example 1. Describing a special parallelogram. Decide whether each statement is always, sometimes, or never true. A rhombus is a rectangle. Sometimes. because it can be a square. So it's not always, sometimes. A parallelogram is a rectangle, sometimes. A parallelogram can be a square. A square is a rhombus. Square is always a rhombus. Rectangle is a parallelogram. Yes, always. So we're going to do the proof table. The given is ABCD is a rhombus. Prove that AC is perpendicular to BD. Okay? So we're going to write statements and reasons. Number 1, ABCD is a rhombus. That is given. Please write that. Number 2, we're going to write that AB is congruent to CB and congruent to CD, congruent to AD. I'm going to write all 4 of these sides are congruent to each other. That's definition of rhombus. We're going to also write the AX is congruent to CX, because we need to prove that they are AC and BD are perpendicular. So I want you to write diagonals of a parallelogram rhombus bisect each other. Diagonals of a rhombus bisect each other. Next thing we're going to write is BX is also congruent to DX. Same thing. Diagonals of a rhombus bisect each other. Next thing we're going to write is AXB, triangle AXB is congruent to CXB, right here, CXB. So we're going to write side congruent post. So right here you have side, 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 side. They are congruent. Therefore, this angle AXB, CXB, they are congruent because of CPCTC. Then AC, right here, is perpendicular to BD because congruent adjacent angles. So, if you look at this proof, you have this side and this side, this side, this side, they are all equal to each other. So, this side and this side, they are congruent. And this is what they share. And then this bisect here, this is a diagonal. So you can conclude that this triangle is congruent to this triangle because of side, 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 right? And then, you know, these two angles are congruent because they are CPCTC. And you can conclude that these two are perpendicular because you have congruent adjacent angle, which is 90 and 90 here, right? So they are congruent here. So you can actually use that to prove that using the side, side, side congruent triangle. Postulate. So this post means postulate. That's what I mean. So coordinate proof, rhombus, given ABCD is a parallelogram. So when you do that, you're going to use the distance formula to prove all the sides are congruent. So when you're proving that all the sides are congruent, you use the distance formula. So let's look at the test of a parallelogram. Both pairs opposite side of are parallel. Both pairs of opposite sides are congruent. Both pairs of opposite angles are congruent. All consecutive angles add to be 180. Diagonals bisect each other. One pair of side is parallel and congruent. So we need to know the tests to see if a quadrilateral or a polygon is a parallelogram by checking these. Both pairs opposite sides parallel, they are congruent, their opposite angles are congruent, consecutive angles 180, diagonals bisect each other, one pair of sides is parallel and congruent. We did this last class. So what about the rhombus? So rhombus, the plural for rhombus is rhombi. Their property is all four sides are congruent. Okay. Diagonals are perpendicular. Diagonals bisect opposite angles. All parallelograms properties. So they have all of these. Okay. So that's rhombus. Rectangles has four right angles. Diagonals are congruent. All parallelograms property, which is this. Okay. Squares, the only regular quadrilateral. Regular means all congruent sides and angles. Okay. All properties of parallelograms, rectangles, and rhombi. So this square has all of these. This, and this. Okay. So square has everything. So what am I? I'm a quadrilateral where all the sides are equal. What could I be? I can be rhombus or square because they have all equal size. But not rectangle. Okay, rectangle, the one side is longer than the other. I'm a quadrilateral where the opposite sides are parallel. What could I be? Parallelogram, rectangle, rhombus, or square. All of them, right? They all have opposite sides. They're parallel. So you have to write all of them, please. Okay, so let's look at this. I'm going to show you a quadrilateral. You tell me what is the best name for this using the properties. You need to use a property to prove it. So let's take a look. Look at the properties for parallelogram, rectangles, and rhombus. Okay. So here, diagonals are perpendicular. So look at where they mark over here. You can see that. So this is the property. So that is a rhombus. It is congruent too, but because of the perpendicular part, we're going to conclude that this is a rhombus. Next one, what is the best name for this? What did they show here? Diagonals are congruent. Okay. Diagonals are not perpendicular, so we're not going to pick that. And it's not a square, definitely, you can tell. So it is rectangle. Please highlight this property. The previous slide also, highlight this one. Please highlight that or circle that. What's this one? Which property should I circle? Everybody highlight or circle. Diagonals are congruent. They show that. What else do they show? Diagonals are perpendicular. So is it a rectangle or a rhombus? Neither. It is actually a square. As you can tell, it is a regular quadrilateral. All sides are equal. All angles are congruent. That's a regular quadrilateral. So caution, there's a difference between what could this be and what is the best name. This could be a parallelogram or rectangle, and we know for sure this is a parallelogram, but the best name for this will be a rectangle, right? Because it's 90-degree angles. So there's a difference between what could this be, but what is the best name, okay? It could be a parallelogram, but the best name will be a rectangle. Obviously, right? So match the property with all the types of a quadrilateral which have that property. The diagonals are congruent. Which ones? Rectangle and square, right? Both pairs of opposite sides are congruent. Which ones? Parallelogram, rectangle, rhombus, and square, all of them.